This is Fred Sturm. Thanks for visiting my website and this online jazz composition and arranging session. I hope that the music that follows will interest you regardless of your level and experience as a writer. Because I'll be speaking over the recorded audio tracks throughout the session, I encourage you to listen to the full recordings, examine the complete scores, and investigate the excerpts and in-depth analyses referred to elsewhere on the website. I developed a book and corresponding CD titled Changes Over Time, The Evolution of Jazz Arranging. That study showcased historically significant arrangements of three classic jazz compositions: Jelly Roll Morton's King Porter Stomp, Don Redman's Chant of the Weed, Billy Strayhorn's Take the A-Train, and one American popular standard, the 1931 Gerald Marks and Seymour Simons tune called All of Me. 35 superb arrangements by Don Redman, Fletcher Henderson, Duke Ellington, Billy Strayhorn, Gil Evans, Thad Jones, and many others illustrated the development of rhythmic, melodic, harmonic, orchestrational, and structural variation in jazz arranging during the 20th century. I then commissioned four contemporary masters, Bob Brookmeyer, Bill Holman, Claire Fisher, and Manny Album, to create new arrangements of the four case study compositions. Several years after the book was finished, I decided to tackle one of the tunes myself and set out to arrange, or as I was viewing it then, to reconstruct the tune All of Me. As a crucial part of that learning process, I revisited four masterpiece scores, historically significant jazz ensemble renditions of All of Me that spanned 5 decades by Benny Carter, Billy Byers, Thad Jones, and Manny Album. Let's briefly sample the scores and recordings of those four great arrangements, and then I'll describe how I approached my own version. Benny Carter arranged this version in 1940. The striking feature was a full chorus 32-bar sax section solo, which occupied more than a third of the chart. His lead alto line, doubled an octave lower by the baritone, preserved the original melody in a highly ornamented context. Melodic embellishments used chordal arpeggiations, stepwise diatonic lines, and chromatic planing. His harmonic variations included secondary dominance and tritone substitutions. In his 1963 arrangement, Billy Byers used this cross-rhythmic introduction as transition material within the chart and as an ending. In his shout chorus, Byers duplicated the trumpet parts an octave lower in the trombones and first four saxes, while the Barry doubled the lead trumpet 2 octaves lower. All were scored in close position block voicings parallel to the melody, a powerful linear effect. This 1985 arrangement was quintessential Thad Jones with lyrical, tuneful, swinging lines over a richly varied harmonic palette. Thad's arrangement featured a trademark sax solo with soprano lead, generating an airy sectional timbre. The melody was colored with chord extensions and alterations, and the 5-part sonorities typically spanned from a 9th to an 11th between the outer voices. In the second chorus, Thad pitted a linear variation in the soprano and trumpet against short quarter note comping in the low brass. He was able to mask dense vertical sonorities and complex harmonic substitutions in the context of understated rhythms and simple, tuneful melodies. In his 1994 rendition titled Not Quite All of Me, Manny Album called for the distinct color of brass bucket mutes in his introduction, and the veiled mute timbre complemented the brushes, the subdued power of the brass, and produced an understated first chorus. Manny transformed the traditional 2 or 4-beat rhythmic feel of All of Me into a jazz waltz and expanded the harmonic rhythm. His frequent use of substitute harmonies, particularly in improvisational sections, drew upon the language he heard expressed by improvising soloists. Audience familiarity with this popular tune granted him the artistic latitude to design his entire arrangement with only part of the first original phrase intact. He established the recognizable opening phrase in the first 8 bars and then only hinted at the original melody for the rest of the arrangement. Manny once said that an arrangement is really a composition regardless of how much of it is decomposed or recomposed. The concept of working with cells of rhythm and melody can come from many different places. As I began my own reconstruction of all of me, I searched for inventive ways to present long-established jazz writing conventions in less conventional and often abstract fashions. While my musical predecessors progressively approached their arrangements of all of me over the decades with a jazz writer's evolving arsenal of melodic, harmonic, rhythmic, and orchestrational techniques, I conversely tried to reduce those materials to the simplest components. First, I disassembled the A section, the first 8 bars of the melody to all of me, searching for small, distinct melodic cells of 2 or 3 pitches. In the first 6 bars, the odd measures all begin with a 3-note descending arpeggiation, C, G, E in bar 1, B, G sharp, and E in bar 3, A, G, E in bar 5, and the last 2 measures display a 2-pitch drop from G to F. Those cells assume both harmonic and intervallic implications. The recurrence of the pitch E on the second half of every other bar has obvious pedal characteristics, offering the options of modal and harmonic variations. I chose to extract all of the E pitches from the first 8 bars, saving the pedal point for dramatic effect later in the score. When I removed those pedal E's, prominent intervals burst forth, specifically the perfect fourth between C and G in bar 1, the minor third between B and G sharp in bar 3, the major second between A and G in measure 5, and between G and F in bar 7. I set aside embellishing notes that became superfluous to the defining cells and intervals, reducing the original melody to the smallest defining components. Then I took the liberty to rework the resulting melodic material until its linear design appealed to me, and when I sustained all of the pitches in succession, I liked the harmonic implications too. I similarly dissected the B section, bars 9 through 17 of the original melody, and the 3-note descending motives in measures 9 and 13 leaped out as unifying features. It wasn't much of a stretch to chromatically plug the full-step melodic gap in bar 11 and drop it an octave to establish a continuing descending sequence, and when I extended the end of the sequence just 2 more half steps, I landed on the dominant G, routing me home to tonic C. The C section also serves as the highly identifiable tag for the tune All of Me. The first 3 pitches in the melody, D, C, and B, are scalar steps that supply a nice contrast to the intervallic leaps and chromatics of my first 16 bars, so I decided to work with that new stepwise cell linearly. I knew from the outset that I wouldn't use the original chord changes for the solo sections, so I looked for ways to subtly reference the original harmonies in a contemporary improvisational framework. The E pedal point of the A section gave me the unifying glue I was looking for, but I didn't want to limit myself to a single modality. I found the best compromise when I superimposed a slight variation of the original changes cycling over a sustained pedal. I determined that I'd need a different improvisational format for a second solo section. Because the first solo was sustained over a single pedal, I searched for something to break up the framework with a recurring rhythmic pattern and lots of transparent gaps for the soloist. Again, trying to distance myself from the original changes, I arrived at a variation of the original 1-3-6-2 root movement. To avoid the predictability of ever-present 4- and 8-bar phrases, I appended the vamp with an additional chord to establish a 10-bar repeating cycle. I wanted to incorporate a semblance of the powerful harmonic progression in the C section or tag of the tune, and I felt like my rendition needed some vaulting and angular melodic structures. This seemed like the ideal place for a purely linear statement with the entire band in octaves, avoiding any chordal support. The line itself provided the necessary harmonic implications that I was seeking. All of those devices supply the building blocks for the reconstruction of all of me. Let's listen now to the entire work and see how those materials link together to form what I eventually titled Take It All. Scored a step below the original key of C, each note of the reconstructed melody is presented with a simultaneous staccato punch and corresponding sustained pitch without a clock reference. As the chromatic linear descent begins, time kicks in with the drums, but the bass register remains conspicuously empty. The intervallic cells kick in here. First, perfect fourth intervals define the B-flat tonic chord, then minor third intervals define the altered 3, Next, the major second and minor third cells define the 6-7 chord. Finally, the minor 2 chord is defined by a mass of second intervals. The bass pedal finally appears, the sax section explores variations on the 3-note tag motive, and the brass presents another variation on the intervallic cells to define the old 1-3-6-2 progression. Then the winds play a triple transposition of the abandoned 4-note motive from the 6th bar of the original melody. That all gives way to a single voice variation on the chromatic descending line and diverging chromatic structures in the winds. The altos present another A section variation with ensemble hits in the gaps over the old 1-3-6-2 progression. The trumpets play the tag melody in 3/8 with the rest an eighth note behind them in ascending chromatic fifths. Then all the voices run chromatically to arrive at the target unison concert F. The open tenor solo is a repeating 8-bar vamp that uses a slight variation of the old 1-3-6-2 progression over the D pedal. The resulting vamp is a cycle of 4 modes: B-flat major in first inversion, then D7 altered, then G Aeolian over D, and finally C Dorian over D. The soloist and the rhythm section are instructed to begin quietly with simple, understated, and transparent gestures that gradually build in intensity. The drums and the piano are encouraged to interact soloistically with the tenor, and the bass is free to ornament the pedal point rhythmically and melodically. On cue, the trombones and baritone express the background harmonies with the smallest possible gestures, sustained unison whole notes against the continuing pedal point. In contrast to conventional background horn pads, the accompanying horns now break into canonic quarter note gestures a beat apart, creating a non-linear textural background. The sax background eighths activate the displaced cannons of the trombones a fifth higher, increasing the intensity of the rhythm. The winds collectively embellish ascending open fifth structures in D Phrygian that ascend stepwise over the continuing pedal. Finally, the solo peaks, and it coincides with the injection of a fresh harmonic structure, a G major suspended chord. The soft, dense, repeating structures swell up and down under the alto and trombone tag motive to frame the winding down of the tenor solo. The accompaniment diminishes and the final chord is rhythmically extended, allowing the soloist to die away. The trumpet solo section is transposed up a fourth to E flat, and the new harmonic variation offers yet another twist on the old 1-3-6-2 root movement, which in this key would be E flat to G to C to F. Each two-chord gesture embellishes that root movement, but the sonorities above are varied to create a series of Lydian modal fields for the trumpet soloist. Breaking away from the conventional lengths of solo vamps, the solo section is extended to a 10-bar cycle. The written accompaniment figures in the rhythm section are broken to create open gaps, and the soloist is encouraged to begin simply, sporadically, and freely break away linearly from the expressed changes. Now the accompanying winds simply orchestrate what was the rhythm section vamp. The tenors and guitar present simple rhythmic motives on stepwise intervals to create unobtrusive contrapuntal interest. The altos and fourth trumpet present a third contrapuntal event in similar stepwise cells. That entire previous 8-bar background accompaniment is continued, but the brass ensemble figure is elevated an octave to bring the trumpet solo to a conclusion. The score returns to B-flat, and the bass range clears out again, revealing another intervallic embellishment of the A changes. The drum set trades irregular phrases with the ensemble in a variation of the traditional convention of trading fours. Overlapping ornamentations of stepwise lines, again derived from the tagged cell, finally activate this C minor 13 Dorian modality. The drums play time with strong backbeats, the bass walks, and the low winds kick anticipations to create a driving swing feel, while the trumpets exchange transpositions of the original tag motive. The saxes continue more ornamentations of the tag motive that's similar to their 16th notes from the introduction, this time in parallel fourths. The harmonic conclusion of the original tag is delivered with a singular angular line expressed in octaves. Over this 2-bar 5/7 pedal vamp, individual soloists enter to improvise on 3-note cells derived from the original tag motive. All of the wind voices eventually join the collective improvisation on 3-note cells that spell out F dominant, creating an activated wash of the F mixolydian mode. All of the soloists conclude their improvisations on a unison B-flat and break into a written linear unraveling of a B-flat 7 altered chord. The ending polytonal pyramid again pits B-flat major against D major and ends on open fifths.